So the Regulation I rules have been announced and it's double restricted. So I thought I'll do a tier list for double restricted. Now, I have played the past 3 double restricted formats. In 2016, I Top Cut Nationals, 2019, I won a regional, and 2022, I played at Worlds. So I have some experience in double restricted formats. So here's my tier list before the format even begins. Now, everyone knows what the tiers mean, but I'll go through them anyway. S is the best of the best. You probably want at least one of S, and you're going to want to partner that with another S or A tier. B is quite a niche restricted, but is pretty good at that niche, so could be worth using. C probably isn't worth using, but isn't bad. D is bad and E is very bad. I'm also going to order S, A and B, but I'm not going to bother with the rest. So let's start with Groudon. Groudon, I think I'm going to put in A. I think it's very strong. It's very good into a lot of the non-restricteds, like it hits Incineroar, it hits Rillaboom, it weakens Water Urshifu, and it just threatens a lot of damage, but because a lot of the time it tends to be a bit of a glass cannon, that's why I think it should be an A instead of S. Miraidon, I think, is S tier. I think Miraidon is the best restricted in double restricted. It seems like it can just partner with basically any restricted. Adding Electric Terrain is really nice, especially at neutralizing Amoonguss, which a lot of restricteds kind of struggle with Amoonguss in Terra formats. And it just threatens so much damage. It has powerful spread with Terra Fairy Gleam, but powerful Volt Switches, Draco Meteors and Electro Drifts are the main reason for it. So I think that Miraidon is S tier and is the best restricted in double restricted. Terapagos is an interesting one, and I'm going to put it in B. I think that a big thing about Terapagos, which lets it down, is it can't partner with a lot of the restricteds. So it doesn't work well with Miraidon, Koraidon, Groudon or Kyogre because it can get rid of their weather or terrain when it terras. And also in a lot of matchups, you are going to want to terra the Terapagos, which means that a lot of the other restricteds that it could partner with can't terra when a lot of them like to. Zamazenta likes to terra in a lot of matchups, so does Calyrex Shadow, so it's a bit hard to fit on teams. I also think Zamazenta is going to be very popular, which makes Terapagos much worse. I think that when Terapagos is used, the spec set is going to be much stronger than the Calm Mind set in this format. And then there's Mewtwo. Mewtwo, easy S tier. You know, why would Mewtwo not be an S tier? April Fools, Mewtwo's E. There is no reason to use Mewtwo. Any other restricted does what Mewtwo does, but better. Don't use Mewtwo. Lugia, I'm going to put in C. Like, you can do bulky, like, Calm Mind setup stuff, but it's really not worth it. Ho-Oh, bulky attacker, but it's not very powerful. C. Kyogre is where this list gets a bit interesting, because Kyogre in Regulation G is probably an A tier. I think it's S now. And the main reason for this is how good it is at just doing powerful spread damage, which is really threatening to face. And when it's not the Pokemon you're having to rely most on, like you would in a single restricted format, I think Kyogre really comes to its own. Because you can just throw it out straight away, do a lot of damage, and lose it quite early on, and that's fine in double restricted, whereas that's usually not so good in single restricted. So Kyogre, I think, is S tier. I think it works well with basically any other restricted, apart from Koraidon and probably Terapagos, but Kyogre, I think, is going to be so good. I also think that Kyogre we could see a lot of different sets for. I think that Scarf becomes a lot better in double restricted. You have to be timid to outspeed Calyrex Shadow, so you're doing a lot less damage, but in double restricted, that's probably fine, because you can just have it as this late game sweeper or this early game just do a lot of damage and not have to rely on it one-shotting things. Groudon, I'm going to put an A as well. I think that Groudon is going to be very good. Similar reasons to Kyogre, but it's more bulky spread damage. And ground coverage is just really nice, but it relies on Precipice Blades, which is not something you really want to rely on. But when it hits, it's a really good move. Setting up Sun is also really nice, especially with all the past Paradox Pokemon. But its awkward stats and relying on Precipice Blades is why I don't think it could be S tier, and I put it below Koraidon because I don't think it's as consistent. Rayquaza, I think it's either B or C. It's like you can do very powerful like extreme speed stuff, and shutting off weather is nice, and Dragon Ascent is really nice. Like you could have some very cool like Chien, Rayquaza, Zamazenta teams, but I don't think it's that good, so I'm going to put it in C. I think there's just much better options, and if you want a powerful extreme speed user, you could use Dragonite or Entei. Dialga can do telepathy trick room stuff, but it's not that good. I think both Dialgas are here. Palkia, similar thing, but Palkia Origin has a very interesting speed stat with 120, but I'm going to put it in B. And an interesting thing about 120 is it would outspeed a lot of Koraidons and Miraidons that are used in Regulation G, because they tend to run Adamant or Modest, so a max speed Timid Palkia will outspeed them, which I think is very powerful. I'm not really sure what restricted it would pair best with, maybe Kyogre as like a water spam mode, but I think that Palkia Origin has a lot of potential. The Giratinas I'm going to put in C as well. Like, ghost coverage is nice, but they're not that good. And they're weak to the Calyrexes and Miraidon, which is not very nice. Reshiram, you could do fire spam stuff, but there's actually much better fire spam users, so I'm going to put it in D. Like, why would you run a Reshiram when you could have a Chi-Yu? Zekrom, powerful electric damage, but as you can see at the top of his list, there's a much better user of powerful electric damage, so I'm going to put it in D tier. Kieran White you could use with Snow, but Snow's not that good in restricted formats because it forces you to run a load of Ninetales, which is just not a good Pokemon in restricted formats. Kieran Black could see usage. A loaded dice set with like Scale Shot and Icicle Spear is quite strong, but its typing isn't very good and it probably takes a lot of effort to make work, so I'm going to put it in C, but I think that we could see Kieran Black get like a result or two. Regular Kieran E, bad. Cosmog E, Cosmoem E, not very good. Solgaleo I'm going to put in C. You can do Baldo stuff, like you can do some interesting stuff, but it's not that good. Lunala has gotten to the World Championship Finals for past two double restricted formats we've got, both paired with Groudon. It got second in 2022 and it won in 2019. But the issue now is Groudon isn't as good of a restricted as it was before. So, Lunala could probably pair well with stuff like Miraidon and Koraidon, but it was best with Groudon. Lunala is a very good like supportive restricted. Shadow Shield is very powerful, Moongeist Beam does a lot of damage and Meteor Beam can do a lot of damage as well, but it also gives you Tailwind, Trick Room and Wide Guard, and you can also run some other niche support moves like Will-O-Wisp for example, but I think I'm still going to put it in B tier, but at the top of B tier. I think I'd put it above Terrapagos. It's a good support restricted, but I don't know if it's worth it. I feel like we've got a lot of good support now, but we maybe don't need to have a restricted being support, but I might be wrong about this. I think that Lunala might be an A tier, but I'm going to put it in B tier. Necrozma Duskmane I think is a very good Trick Room setter, so I'm going to put it at the bottom of B. If you're running a hard Trick Room team with like Calyrex Ice, I think that it could work quite well because it's such a bulky Trick Room setter. Prism Arm is very good. You could also run it with Kyogre. I ran Duskmane Kyogre for a lot of 2019 and I really liked it, but I don't think it's going to be very good anymore. But I think because it's such a good Trick Room setter, I'm going to put it in B. Dawnwings I think could see some usage, but I think Lunala is better most of the time, so I'm going to put it in C. Necrozma is bad. Zacian? This is going to be a controversial take. Zacian's A tier. Zacian is A tier. So Zacian has the best typing in the game, being Steel Fairy, and that coverage is insane. You can do so much damage with Steel Fairy coverage. But it struggles to hit certain things like Steel types or Fire types. But pair it with a Kyogre or a Groudon or Koraidon, and suddenly those aren't as much of an issue. So I think that Zacian becomes a lot better when you compare it with another restricted. When I was testing it in Regulation G, I used the Terra Fairy Play Rough Source Dance set, and that felt amazing when I wasn't facing a Fire Ogerpon. And its speed stat is insane, like it's one of the fastest restricteds in the format and can threaten one-shots with Terra Fairy Play Rough, or you could go Terra Blast something. I know that Terra Blast Ground was used on Regidrago teams, and I think that's very interesting. So I think Zacian is A tier, but I'm going to put it at the bottom of A. Regularization, bad, E. Zamazenta, S. But I think I'm going to put it below Miraidon and Kyogre. This might be a controversial take as well. I think a lot of people are expecting Zamazenta to be very good and maybe the best restricted, and I think it is going to be the most popular restricted at most regionals, mainly because it pairs so well with every other restricted. I think Zamazenta is also very good because it's very easy to fit onto teams. You can just throw a Zamazenta onto a team and it will probably work quite well. But I think it is going to be more there to support your other restricted, which is why I'm putting it low S, but I think it is S tier. Regular Zamazenta, like D. Not really worth using. Eternatus, part of me wants to put in B, part of me wants to put in C. I think, you know what, I'll put in B. You know what, I'll put it above Palkia. I think that poison coverage is very nice. Dynamax Cannon is a very powerful move. You could run Meteor Beam Power Herb set. You could run like a Cosmic Power Stool set, which could be quite strong. It can hit a lot of things quite well, but it's not really that good of a restricted. It just fits a certain niche quite well. And then Calyrex Ice, I think is S tier, and I don't know if I'd put it above or below Kyogre. I think I'll put it above Kyogre. I think adding a Trick Room mode is very powerful, which Calyrex Ice can do, and just being able to spam Glacial Lance is really nice. I think it pairs very well with Miraidon and with Kyogre and with Zamazenta, especially Miraidon, but it being a bit on the slower side is why I don't think it is the top of S, but it's such a great Pokemon, especially when it can Terra. And then we've got Calyrex Shadow. I'm going to put this in S as well, and I'm going to put it second in S. I think that Calyrex Shadow benefits a lot from double restricted because it changes the way you can sort of play it on teams. A lot of Calyrex Shadow teams you see now are support the Calyrex Shadow. They're very defensive and they get the Calyrex Shadow to set up a nasty plot and then try and sweep the Calyrex Shadow, usually running something like a Covert Cloak or a Spell Tag on it. But I think that in double restricted, you can just let your Calyrex Shadow be spamming Astral Barrages straight away and just threatening a lot of damage, which will force your opponent to target into it, letting your other restricted do what it wants to do. I think that the best Calyrex Shadow sets that we're going to see will be like Sash and Life Orb and maybe even Specs. We saw Calyrex Shadow win the 2022 World Championships paired with Zacian, which was the best restricted at the time. So I think that it wouldn't be surprising to see a lot of Calyrex Shadows paired with Miraidon, which is now the best restricted. And I think that Calyrex Shadow can work very well with all of these restricted in S and A, apart from Calyrex Ice, as you can't have two Calyrexes. So it's very easy to fit on a team and it can just threaten damage straight away. I think that Nasty Plot will still be the best last move on it, but we did see that Encore, for example, did well at EUIC, so Encore could do very well in double restricted formats. And regular Calyrex is bad, so E. So here's my ranking. Feel free to agree or disagree with me in the comments. There's a few that I wouldn't be surprised if they changed tiers, mainly Zacian, Lunala and Terrapagos. Koraidon could be S tier, but I'm going to keep it in A for now. So anyway, if you did enjoy this video, please like, comment, subscribe. It's free and you could always unsubscribe later. So yeah.